That is Ken Wilber. You've heard me talk about him forever in terms of integral theory and moving into a place where we take all aspects of self for a growth moment. He made an appearance in the Unity magazine this month. Yay! I was like, it's about time. I was so happy to see that. But and that clip you just saw was from 2016. So this is not a brand new discussion. It's taken a while for people to catch on. And I know you've heard me say a million times that he recognized, and it actually says this in the article, there's a tipping point where there's 7 to 10% of people that get to a certain point, and then everything starts to shift, you know, and you feel that kind of friction. But it's really the awareness and the willingness of a small percentage of people to transcend what they already know, but include what they already know. So he's never, ever in the integral process of your spirituality ditching anything from before. It's maybe recognizing it in a new light. It's healing that experience. It's including that experience as part of you and as a way to then transcend that into something more. There's a quote I'm going to read right from the article when he where he was asked specifically about what's it mean about everybody knows everything, you know, and we know as part of the unity principles that you follow the God of your understanding, which means you have to have a basis for yourself and know yourself. And that part of that for everybody is right. So he says, we have a huge background of common knowledge we get from our culture. Language is an example. So if everyone is thinking and talking in their language, then they've got most of that right, because no matter how crazy what they say is, we can still understand their words. Also, every system of their body is functioning correctly, or they simply wouldn't be alive. So that's right too. So in part, saying everyone's right and nobody is smart enough to be wrong all the time has a bit of a shock value to it. If nothing else, it helps people understand the need for a certain type of wholeness. In philosophy, for example, pretty much all the schools of thought are right because each has a piece of the pie. They are still around because each of them is saying something that is partially true. But follow that up, I usually add that some type of people are more right than others. That's what modern does, because clearly developmental stages exist in a hierarchy, and each stage is higher than the previous. So we do move and expand. We go up and beyond. The interpretations of the world around us is based in science and needs to be blended with our mysticism interpretations and that awareness. And Ken Wilber refers to it in that clip as Satori. And Satori carries with it that recognition of truth beyond our perceived reality. So the study of science, and this is a quote right from that article too, the study of science gives a relative truth, but the Satori gives the ultimate truth. And we need both as humans. We need to be willing to combine both and not put them in separate categories or to say one is more right than the other, especially when it comes to the Satori. Now, a true Satori incidence is that recognition of the oneness of everything, that unity awareness. And that recognition that we don't need a separate part of us or a separate entity or a separate something out there to make us a whole human, or to make sure that we know that we are, you know, a special part of the universe. Some of you know Rev John White. He was in Lilydale for, I don't know, over 40 years. And I was blessed to be able to work with him for many years, and he would do these Sunday evening experiences during the summer. So you could go during the summer and go to a place, and he would, I don't know, sometimes when I was there helping out, there were 40 or 50 people there in this experience, and he would walk people through a meditation experience, trying to show that awareness or give some type of awareness that they were more than what they are, that they are part of something greater. And there were several times in witnessing what people's reactions were to this that I asked him one day, because some of the reactions were, guide named so-and-so says that I need to do this with my life, or angel so-and-so came to me while we were doing this, and how cool is that I had this wonderful experience with angel so-and-so, and now I can do this with my life, or I'm going to try this because angel so-and-so said for me to do this or that. And I said, what is up with that? Why? Because I had not that experience, right? The idea of something else, that was not mine. Mine was more of a simple awareness in the moment. And I wasn't sure if that was because I was in a helper mode and maybe I wasn't letting myself do anything else, or there was something broke in me, because all these people are like, this being of light of some entity came to me and said yada, yada, yada during my experience. And I'll never forget this because it helped me so much understand people. He said, sometimes in a feeling of less, they make up what they think they need to experience. So he was well aware that the interpretations were sometimes based on our ability to recognize our fullness in that oneness. I'll let that sink in a little bit. That the idea of another being showing themselves to us in any kind of experience, even though that is a great experience, our interpretation of that may be based on what we perceive as our role more than what's really happening. This past weekend, so many of you know that I do study with the Integral Life people. They have online development that I am a part of. It's an international group. I'm also part of another international group that's run by the Inner Quest Foundation. And I was lucky enough to be able to join in a research paper topic discussion this weekend about gender in spirituality, and specifically in spiritualism. And a lot of the discussions about how women seem to be more involved sometimes in that aspect than men. But that there was some talk about, even though that would happen, when women would speak, sometimes the other, like what would happen in John White's experience, would be a male other, right? So their voice would lower, or there was a recognition of a male presence being with them to speak. And that idea that, is that because these women needed more, or is it because society wouldn't listen to them unless there was more? You know, and which part of that is at play? And then the idea that guides, and that we have some kind of either special angel or special guide, or that one person walking with us that's not physical, didn't really come about in the vernacular until 1917. I hope I wrote that date down right. That came right from Brian Robertson. And why is that? Why do we need all of a sudden in our spirituality the other? And that is not, so if I go back a few weeks ago, I talked to you about these lovely wings up here. I think it was December, right? And that Charles Fillmore, in explaining these wings, as you know, and they are an ancient, I know you can't see them in the thing here, but they're the Egyptian wings, the ancient symbol that represents that relationship between spirit and soul and body. And that soul gives wings to the body, and spirit is that enveloping principle, that spirit is the everything. You know, these wings are not disconnected from the center at all. It's all one piece, but we recognize from this perspective that there's a little bit of separation when there really is not, that we move back into that globe, that centerpiece. And as we recognize more of our spiritual nature, we recognize it more as one piece and not separate, that we are in one in one oneness presence, in one unity, and this, and many other than Charles Fillmore recognized that oneness well before 1917, right? And yet there is something in our collective psyche that said, well, we need something else to be special and moving forward. And I'm not sure why, right? I'm not sure why that is. And during the discussion that I had with these people this weekend, I asked why we hadn't moved past that idea. If it was merely a social vehicle, a social vehicle to recognize each other in some way, or to be heard. In the case of some of the women that would use are using the lower tone of voice to be recognized. So Brian Robertson, during this discussion, he first pointed out that guides are often really aspects or archetypes of ourselves, which I think is really true, because they're a part of ourselves maybe that we are totally recognizing as part of our guiding moment, or part of ourselves that we're really recognizing as helping make our decisions and in our awareness. And yet there's something in us that doesn't fully integrate that, doesn't transcend and include. And so it becomes this other piece. There's something maybe there that we haven't healed, or that we don't feel worthy enough to recognize. And if we have that in place of like a guide, or somebody tells us that it's a guide, then it's easier to say, oh, well, then that's why I'm following that, because it's something else other than me that's pointing that out. He also suggested that there was something in me, because I've seen this a lot lately, and I was forefront in saying, there's something that's been in my face that's kind of grating me, that people don't seem to understand that they are already connected. We don't need an extra other to understand, to make decisions, to decide, how to transcend and include, to heal, and all of that. So you guys know me, I sat on that over the last, since then. And then I remembered our discussion on the unity wings, and that our growth actually brings us closer to that fullness. But that means we have to change, right? That means we have to actually change ourselves in the process and recognize that we're changing our perspective. And that can be uncomfortable, right? That can be uncomfortable to move into and to say something different, or to move away from where maybe our group is that recognize that vocabulary, and to say something different. We stop, when we stop outsourcing our healing and recognize that we are in charge of it, right? That it's not something that's given to us, but it's something that we actively integrate and bring into balance, that it becomes our responsibility. Sometimes that's a scary thing, because then there's not some far off God out there or spirit out there that we have to get in touch with. It really is something inside of us that we are aware of. And then I remembered when my husband was told that he had no other option but hospice, and we were in this little doctor room, and the doctor was talking. And I remember the doctor not being very tall, because I could, wasn't too much taller than me, and I could get kind of like right here with him. There was this calmness in the room when, at least for me, from my perspective, when we were told that information, there was this calmness. I don't know if you've ever seen shows where time stops and they show like all the little particles in the air that are totally still, and even, breath that has been released is just kind of hanging in the air. And it was one of those cinematic moments, but in feeling. And that time no longer had any meaning, So for me, there was like this great space of like feeling that it was all okay. And how bizarre is that to feel that it is all okay in the middle of saying, you need to go home now, take your husband home and call hospice. There's nothing else we can do here. And yet I was like, huh. And there was a, just a feeling, and looking back, it was probably like a split second for everybody else that was going on. But for me, it was like this holding in time moment of this is okay. This is okay. And I went home that night, and later that night when that came back to me, I sat down at the Google and I typed in the feelings that I had at the time. I was trying to, put some kind of recognition around it. And this painting of Angel Uriel showed up on my screen based on, the parameters of the feelings. And then in this image of Angel Uriel, it was really golden, bright light, sunflowers, butterflies, everything you can imagine in prettiness. And you read the bottom and it says, angel of wisdom, especially in difficult situations. So I'm trying to describe this to people, to a friend the next day. And what I ended up turning that into was this idea that Angel Uriel showed up at that moment. And I actually said to the doctor while we were leaving that every doctor needs a big angel behind them every time they say something like that. So my narrative became something that others could grasp onto, not necessarily what I had experienced. And I wonder how many times do we do that? How many times do we change our narrative so that it's more acceptable to somebody around us, so that we don't get questioned for feeling or recognizing anything, our moment of recognition in any other way than what we really did. It's the idea again of transcending and including. So maybe that's my rub. I don't like it when other people do it, but at that moment, when I recounted it to somebody else, I totally put that in the place of other. So if some other being came and said it was all right, then it's okay to feel that way. When really it was a feeling. There was no visual aspect of it, anything. I got that visual later because I typed in a bunch of words and that's what the computer said. That's what the visual was, and it matched. And people even to this day are like, dude, that was amazing. You must like be an incredible whatever because you were able to recognize that angel. And like, no, that's no. So again, when he said at the beginning video that we need to take both our science, right, and our experience in those moments and be able to blend them in a way that's true for us, and then express that honestly, that's when we get that rising moment. And that's when we bring the rest of society with us. And I don't know that any text, any scripture, anything, because if we really recognize it, all the scripture, all the texts, and it's not that it's bad, it's really good. I'm glad we have all that stuff, but it's really from the perspective and the interpretation of the people at the time. So how do we take it into today? Well, we need to recognize it's their interpretation at the time, and we can come up with our interpretation of our life now. It doesn't have to be based on something in some text 5,000, 6,000, 3,000, 2,000 years ago. There's no magic formula in knowing the truth. Our unique talent, though, I think it's expressed more when we recognize our own internal truth and honor it. So whatever our special talent is here, it will be expressed more when we don't outsource it to this entity or that angel or that guide is with me doing that. It's you and your light and your connection that's fully recognizing it and allowing it to bloom. Transcending beyond our past interpretations, including our past experiences with whatever healing and forgiveness we need to wrap around that, right? And not denying or ignoring that we felt or recognized something like that at one time, but allowing ourselves to wrap it in a truer light. The more we know, the more experience we have. So my own connection and awareness that any experience was not the end of the world, and it was all right that I accepted my feelings, that this is okay. It might suck, but it's okay. And not needing to outsource that or say, well, somebody else is taking care of it, because really, if we're fully honest with ourselves, we are the ones in full responsibility of taking care of that connection. We are. And as we keep integrating, we'll keep expanding. And we will feel that recognition, that one that we already are. That's in the symbol that we look at every week. Thank you.